So good afternoon, everyone. And my name's Sarah Schroth. Brad, you should hear how other people pronounce it, so no worries. I actually was at a school district and their superintendent told me that I pronounced it wrong. So in front of their entire auditorium. So anyway, I don't mind at all. So as Brad mentioned, I'm the regional coordinator for our 11 county region for the Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness program. And our program falls under the Pennsylvania Department of Education's purview. So I am based out of IU 28, but we have an 11 county region. On the map, it is all of the purple counties. But in our coverage area, we work with 63 school districts, all 11 county children and youth offices. In addition to, we serve about 18 shelters, including teen shelters, family, emergency, and domestic violence shelters. We're also responsible for working with all of the community action partners and additional programs who serve youth experiencing homelessness and their families. Our program falls under the McKinney-Vento Federal Act, which went into an effect in 1987. And that law is to protect students, children from birth through the age of 22 who are experiencing homelessness and we are required to support them through educational stability. So we often when we hear the word homeless, I think everyone has a mental image that they might see, an individual who is perhaps unkempt, sleeping on the streets. Typically, I think when polling the audience, individuals think of middle-aged males who are living in these situations. But the reality is that the fastest growing population of individuals experiencing homelessness are women, children, and families. Um, Currently, the statistics for the United States is that 1 in 30 children in the US is experiencing homelessness, which is an all-time high. Recently, it was shared during a meeting in Indiana County that homelessness across Pennsylvania is up overall at up 12%. Considering the current economic, status of our country. Of that growing population of families experiencing homelessness, 65% of those are single women with their children. Often those families are leaving their homes because they have experienced some type of intimate partner violence. When also some additional statistics, when polled, there was a study done by Chapin Hall University. When polled, homeless youth, over half of them reported that they've spent at least one day a month without food, which is why in so many school districts and communities, we have backpack programs. In Indiana County, we call it Power Pack through our community action program to send food homeless students over the weekend to help eliminate some of that food insecurity. Many school districts have implemented such programs and across our Commonwealth, again, to help eliminate some of that food insecurity. Because the reality is that there are children who do go home on Friday afternoon, leaving your classrooms, your buildings, and unfortunately may not know when their next meal is until they walk back into your buildings on that following Monday morning. Um, Thankfully, there are food pantries throughout our communities and other agencies that provide emergency food to help with that as well. Something that I always like to briefly discuss during these trainings also, just to heighten your awareness, is that oftentimes children who are identified as experiencing homelessness, especially those who are unaccompanied homeless teens who've been kicked out, thrown out, or abandoned by their parents, are at an increased risk of human trafficking. Statistically, the data shows that around 20,000 kids annually are subject to the human trafficking network per year. Um, we know that they are looking for an individual who they deem trustworthy, who may be taking them in when their family has kicked them out or abandoned them. And so oftentimes they are at risk of trafficking. While not all teens who leave their homes, of course, are leaving so because of intense conflict and harm, at least half of them feel that they are in physical danger when leaving their homes. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the contributing factors to homelessness for our unaccompanied homeless youth in a couple of slides. So often, as I mentioned, we think of homelessness and individuals experiencing homelessness as a middle-aged individual. But what we know is that across the United States, the average age of homelessness is actually 11. Those are your end of fifth grade, beginning of sixth grade students, and currently my own child is, well, he just turned 12 not long ago. Um, I have been sharing this story throughout the school year. That last year, while going through our data system that Brad is responsible for reporting into, I'd happened to been looking at my own local school district to make sure an identified student had been reported. Happened to notice that there were 3 students in my son's grade and in his building who were on that list. And as we were preparing our Valentines a month or so later, those 3 names were all on his class list. Knowing that I had a direct impact by providing resources to those families, hygiene items, and school supplies to those students really hit hard for me. Really hit home to know that we were providing support for those students and families who were desperately in need at that time, and that I had been there for their Valentine's party and could connect those names and faces just really hit home for me. As I mentioned, our program falls under the McKinney-Vento Federal Act, and our definition is just slightly different than what HUD, or the Housing and Urban Development Project, defines homelessness as. So educationally speaking, homelessness is defined as a child who's lacking a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. The fixed, of course, means that it cannot, if they're lacking a fixed nighttime residence, it means that that residence can be moved. So something like a car, a camper, or a tent, of course, is not fixed to the ground. We would deem a child in that situation homeless, of course. Regular is talking about a routine basis. So where are they sleeping every night? If their routine is not the same, if they are couch surfing or staying with multiple families throughout the course of a week or a month, in a shelter or a hotel, those are all not non-regular nighttime residences and adequate. I always share, that there are families who do live in homes like the one that you can see on the screen. I did home visiting for 5 years and have been to mobile homes that look not too dissimilar from this one. And while the families may own the property or be leasing the land, paying rent in that mobile home, if it's inadequate for the children, if there's inadequate room, exposed wires, or, the siding is coming off and the insulation is exposed here, if it's unsafe, we would deem it inadequate. And, when doing this presentation in person, often, individuals say, yeah, no, nobody, I think, would deem that adequate. But often, families are living in these situations. And so the law is about the children, and we would potentially identify them. So, in addition to lacking fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residences, we also look at a few other subcategories or other accommodations that meet the definition. So, HUD does not follow, especially this portion of our definition. So, the primary category where we find families is in the doubled up or shared housing situation. And those who are sharing housing are doing so because of a loss of job or some other type of economic hardship, illness, or again, some other catastrophic life event that has forced them to live in someone else's household and share their housing. About 70% of the families in our 11 county region live in doubled up situations. And as I mentioned, HUD does not recognize that, so that actually keeps them from getting support services that they may desperately need. I did discuss, of course, motels and hotels and camping situations, but often we do hear of families who are living in barns or abandoned buildings. We've worked with a few families in the last few years where the family has been separated and the parents are sleeping in a storage unit while the children are staying with grandparents. And there, of course, are lots of other situations that I know that you are all referring to, Brad, because I get all of the phone calls about some of those unique situations. We, of course, obviously recognize families in emergency or transitional shelters. In addition, we also recognize children who are placed under a safety plan by the county children and youth services, or children, youth, and family services, because those are temporary and not court ordered, and it is for a safety reason, which would be the category of the event. Migratory children, if they are lacking fixed, regular, adequate, or living doubled up or in a shelter, also would qualify. And then our largest group of youth who go unidentified, underidentified, are unaccompanied homeless youth. And those are the youth who are not living in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, and they are lacking a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence or doubled up in a shelter, etc. Those students often go under-identified because, as adults, we tend to put our judgment in place about why a child may have left the home, of their legal guardian, even if it's as simple as they don't agree with the rules. If they leave their home even for one night throughout the school year, they are considered an unaccompanied homeless youth if the adult in the house does not have legal custody of them. They also have some additional rights and protections, such as being permitted to enroll themselves in school with the assistance of the homeless liaison or staff at that school district where they would wish to attend. There are some other rights and things, but we won't get into all of those at the moment. One of the other things that we look at is the event to make the event or what has happened to the family or the student to cause them to lose their housing or leave their home. And that helps us make our determination. So, of course, things like a natural disaster, such as a fire, would be very obvious, to the entire school community, and we would hear about that. But things like mold in the home or divorce and separation or domestic violence is not something that we would necessarily know about, but Brad's responsibility is to kind of investigate all of those situations. And of course, we talked about runaways, throwaways, or abandonment by parents. But things like incarceration, illness, and eviction all can be considered, should be considered an event as well. So what's the purpose? Why do we make sure that you know the definition? Why does it matter? Why does McKinney-Vento exist? So McKinney-Vento exists so that we can provide school stability to all students who are experiencing homelessness. And so they have a litany of rights so that they can continue, their education. That means when a student has lost their housing, and they are outside of either their catchment area for their elementary building, or if they are outside of the district boundaries, they have the right to continue in that building and or school district of origin the entire time they're homeless, or they are able to continue to the end of the academic year in which they're permanently housed. That is probably the most common question that we receive is how long can a family stay or a student stay? How long are they eligible? In addition to that, so as I mentioned, they're allowed to return to that school district of origin or their building of origin. We presume that it is in their best interest, but the student is also allowed, if they were in another elementary catchment area or within another district, to enroll in that catchment area or to enroll in that other district. And it is the student and the family's right to make the decision and not the school district's right. We still have conversations. We suggest a best interest meeting or discussion to help the student and or family make their best choice. And then the other rights come into place after that. So if the student is coming back to their school or of origin, whether that's district or building of origin, the district is responsible for providing transportation. That transportation can be a shared responsibility between the district of origin and the district of residence. It also the school district has the right to ask the family if they're able to transport. If it is a safety plan through children and youth, they may even ask children and youth to help support those transportation needs. School districts have been very creative. I know we have a student within your own district who Brad had to be very creative with finding transportation for that child. But it is the district's responsibility. Additional supports for students are free school lunch and school breakfast through through the through categorical eligibility. Runaway, homeless, migrant, and foster youth are all eligible for free meals through this program and automatically eligible. Additionally, there are all students experiencing homelessness. The term enrollment includes attending any extracurricular activities and participating fully in school, just as their peers are. If they miss the deadline for a physical, if they need assistance with paying for enrollment fees, or perhaps need a pair of cleats to participate in a sport, or help paying for their uniform for marching band. There is funding and there are ways to help each individual student still be able to participate in those extracurriculars. And transportation is also supposed to be provided for students with their extracurricular activities if they are experiencing homelessness. Just moving on to a little bit of data, just to kind of share with you where we are as a state, but also a region. So PDE's most recently published data is from the 22-23 school year. And at that time, there were not just over, there were 46,700 students identified as experiencing homelessness. And that is from birth through the age of 22 with that extension for those individuals with IEPs and special education determinations. So they are able to stay through 22 now. If you take a look at where the nighttime status is, this is at the time of their identification. Pennsylvania, about 70% of the families that we identify, those children are shared housing. Again, to go back to HUD says that those families that is self-resolving homelessness. So those are 70% of those families would actually be eligible for services if it were not for McKinney-Vento. When we take a look at our regional data for the same school year, of those 46,000 students, yes, 20. No, I'm sorry, 2,000, just over 2,000 of those students were from within our region, and almost 80% of our families are living doubled up in our region. That's just because we lack the shelters and a transitional housing. And not even all of our school districts have hotels within their catchment areas. Um, some good news is that there is an agency in Armstrong County who is working to open a shelter that's through Connections of Armstrong. They are a newer agency to support individuals. And we've been working with them and are really hoping that they are able to get that shelter open within the next few years. While it won't be the answer to homelessness, it will be a way to support, of course, those families who are in great need. Just a quick look at just the distribution of age for our region. So as I said, Pennsylvania's average, actually, I didn't say Pennsylvania's average age. It is 9, and our regional data backs that information up. We have a high number of 12th graders who are identified. One of our activities that we do annually in our region is to I'm sorry, excuse me, is to identify seniors so that we can provide them with support after graduation. We give them each a gift at the end of the school year to help them, whether they're going to college, if they're going into the military, the workforce right away, or if they're undecided, they each receive a gift or are eligible to receive a gift from our office. And that includes hygiene items, school supplies, bedding. We've provided clothing, laundry detergent, and things like that to help those students as well. So again, we make sure that you know this definition so that you can help us identify students and their needs. Brad, of course, can't be in every building every day, but you are the eyes and the ears for the district. And those of you who especially are in those primary grades know everything that's going on in your students' lives. So we ask just that you remember the definition of McKinney-Vento, because they're not necessarily telling you everything that's going on in their lives. But if you suspect something, I just strongly encourage you to report it to Brad. The district has over 100 students identified already this school year. Which I think is just an incredible number, for such a rural district. But please make sure that you refer anything that you suspect is homelessness to Brad, so that he can investigate those situations. If you find yourself talking with a family who is in need of some resources, our ECYEH, Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness program, has created an app for resources called Finding Your Way in PA. It's a website or an Apple or Android app where you can share with families if they're looking for things like health resources, food, clothing, closets, pantries. They can connect with different county agencies and a whole litany of other resources on that website or on that app. And we are constantly adding more resources. So if you happen to browse and see something missing, please let us know so that we can make sure we can add more resources there. It is a free website and is maintained under our program. It's an excellent way to have 211, but at your fingertips. For more information, some of our state and national resources will be listed on the slides that you'll receive from me. I'm going to email those to Brad. But if you would like to learn more, you certainly can explore the state website or national resources, or please at any time feel free to reach out to myself or to Irene Walker, who is our homeless specialist here at the IU. Does anyone, I know that we're all kind of some of you are on your own or in the library or in a different space. Are there any questions for me this afternoon? No, okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you all for your time this afternoon, and thank you for all you do to support your students in your classroom, especially those who are experiencing homelessness. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. Um,
Just ask the question. I don't know.
was there is a question. So Kim, I know that currently you have about 100, over 100 students. I'm not permitted to give you the exact number because it is not published or finalized by PDE, but Armstrong School District has about 100, a little over 100 students identified this year. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.